Welcome to Free Flow, the Health Tech Law and Policy podcast, where we explore developments in health policy and help you navigate legal and compliance issues that affect your business. I'm your host, Dan Orenstein. On today's episode, I'm joined by Kevin Williams, founder and CEO of Ascend AI. Kevin advises executives, boards, and policymakers on AI adoption, risk, and governance. Prior to Ascend, he successfully launched multiple LLM-based SaaS products and pioneered an innovative program that trained hundreds of professionals on AI innovation. Kevin also serves as an advisor to the Utah Office of AI Policy and chairs the Utah Responsible AI Initiative Workforce Special Interest Group. He co-hosts the weekly podcast AI at Work, focused on practical applications of artificial intelligence. Hello, Kevin. Welcome to Free Flow.
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me.
How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for joining, and really happy to have your expertise on AI development, governance, risk. First, I was wondering if you just talk about how you arrived at where you are in the AI journey. Was this over the last few years you got more interested? How did this come about?
So my journey was a little bit circuitous. I used to be a direct-to-consumer brand owner, so I would buy patents and I would build pretty big digitally native brands. And we were spending a lot of money internationally on our brands, and it became more and more difficult to do the sort of data tracking that we needed to do over billions of points of data for platform reasons. So Apple in particular really crimped the style of digital marketers by limiting the amount of data that was flowing off of their devices, which as a consumer, I loved, but as a digital marketer, pretty much wrecked my day. So we had to lean into machine learning based solutions to figure out how we were going to track all of those different pieces of data. And it never really occurred to me to try and commercialize that solution. It was just something that we were operating with internally. And then I exited those companies what feels like 5 internet minutes before Mr. Altman dropped OpenAI on all of us without any instructions. So as somebody who had been closer to AI than most, I just knew immediately that this was going to change pretty much everything for us all.
Got it. So it was kind of born of necessity in your digital marketing life. And then you developed a real understanding and appreciation for it. So when the revolution started, I guess, a few years ago, you were in there.
There's also a little bit of luck, being in the right place at the right time.
And so then what happened next? So OpenAI came along, ChatGPT, then what?
So I stood up my firm, which is Ascend AI, and I dove right into the fray, trying to solve the world's problems. And what I discovered was nobody else had any idea what I was talking about. So very quickly, we ended up organizing ourselves around education and literacy and leaning into advising firms how they were going to implement this technology, what were the basic tools and techniques and such. And my road to risk was actually down that same alley. That the first sales objection that I would receive was, "We don't know what you're talking about." Okay, great. I can educate you on what I'm talking about. The second,
and when they said that, was that we don't know what you're talking about in terms of governance and risk, or was there something else?
So that was just in general. We don't really know how to think about this new technology yet, or whether it's really a thing. Or is this just a flash in the pan or whatever? But the other pushback that I would get would come from a general counsel or a CISO in the organization who said, "We've just locked down everything in the organization because we don't understand risk. We don't understand what this is going to mean as far as approach angles and our exposure and whatnot." And meanwhile, the business folks in the organization were pretty much losing their mind as they see other organizations start to get ahead, start to wrestle with this. So working on the risk puzzle such that those organizations with very well-founded reasons to be concerned about artificial intelligence and risk, would have more tools that they could deploy in terms of education and tracking and et cetera, such that we could get to the meat of the issue and start solving problems.
Right. So what was your answer to the general counsel who just shut everything down? Was it like, oh, great idea, shut it down until we can get in there? Was it, don't shut things down, like, let's understand your risk tolerances, framework, mitigation, all those types of things? How did you approach that particular situation?
Through education.
Yeah.
Let's identify where the real risks are. Let's identify places in the organization where the risks are relatively low, and embrace a little bit of caution and courage together, such that the organization can start leaning into lower risk activities, such that it's getting the reps that it needs, such that as you figure out the rest of the risk puzzle, you're not totally falling behind.
Right. Okay. So, has your approach, or how has your approach to education and training evolved over time? Like, what did you think it was that they needed a couple of years ago, and what do they actually need in your, having developed perspective since then?
So we have some products that are pretty wonky as far as really leaning into what we felt was going to be regulatory compliance.
Right.
It's pretty clear that this country isn't going to embrace regulations around AI anytime soon, but numerous different states were coming online with different approaches. But most of those approaches were linked into the NIST RMF, so the risk management framework that NIST put together about 18 months ago. So our approach, the initial approach, was to go deep and go wonky and be like, okay, if you end up in a court of law and you're trying to defend this, barring actual regulatory standards, one, you have existing regulatory standards that are out there, the FERPAs, the HIPAAs, the EEOCs, that where AI impacts those. So one, you need to understand where your liability sits with this new technology with existing regulations. And two, you need to have something defensible. And the RMLF felt very defensible. So we leaned into pretty advanced trainings in that respect. Where it morphed and where most organizations are right now is more generalized understanding of risk, because the reality is most of the organizations are at step one. So they have people coming in every day using free tools, using free Chinese tools with no policy, no guardrails, no understanding of the risks that it might be creating in the organization. It felt a lot like sort of basic cybersecurity exposure, the type of thing where you educate people not to pick up a USB stick in the parking lot. That's where a lot of organizations actually are today. So folks listening are thinking that they're way behind. Everybody's way behind.
That does not surprise me. Yeah, it's very new technology. We're very early stage in adopting and understanding it all.
So basic understanding of where the risks lie, the importance of not bringing devices into the organization, et cetera.
So let me ask you something about that. So NIST, that's National Institute on Standards and Technology, I think, right? And they publish all kinds of great risk management frameworks. So this one is the risk management framework for AI. When you say that organizations aren't ready for that, does that mean that there's a process involved in that where they've got to get ready, put controls in place, go and get audited independently and so forth to make sure they've done that, and they're just not even ready to begin that process? They may be at the point where they may need to put in some more basic kind of controls and protections. Did I get that right?
It goes a step beyond there, which is a little bit more macro. Well, first off, NIST has no regulatory teeth. It is a recommended standard, so there is no auditability, really. I mean, there are organizations who are auditing for NIST alignment. We actually do something similar to that as well. Again, it's sort of a defensive measure. But the more macro issue is compliance is inherently tied to performance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And performance in these probabilistic systems, hopefully your audience knows the difference between a deterministic system where it does the same thing every time versus a probabilistic system where it has a chance between 1 and 0 of something happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's really a challenge as far as performance. And if you can't measure performance, you're not going to be able to measure compliance. So even pretty sophisticated organizations are bringing solutions online that solve problems internally, but they actually don't know how to measure them from a probabilistic perspective because they've never really had to do that before. If you were bringing online some deterministic new fancy system that you've built and it does the same thing every single time, it's relatively straightforward to measure the performance. But if you have a system that almost has opinions and can drift between changes in the model, recently we've gone between GPT 5.0, 5.1, 5.2.
And probabilistic is a more apt descriptor of most AI systems. Is that
Yes. So
correct?
For large language models in particular, they are probabilistic. And you hear risks like hallucinations. And hallucinations are a result of the probabilistic nature. And the logical question from a risk perspective is, okay, well, let's just crush the hallucinations. You could do that, but then the system is no longer probabilistic. And if it's no longer probabilistic, it doesn't have the flexibility to generate the results that most users are looking for. So you have to understand the balance between embracing some flexibility in its outputs and maintaining flexibility in terms of what you're trying to accomplish.
Right. Okay. Fascinating. So we were on this risk discussion. So probabilistic versus deterministic. So companies may not may not appreciate the nature of the system that they have, and then risk would flow out of that. Like, for example, risk that it hallucinates or makes some other error that someone depends upon in making a decision or putting a process in place.
But again, it's important to remember that's also performance. And usually the compliance aspects of an organization are different from the performance aspects. But in this case, they're more or less one and the same. And very few organizations are measuring for performance. And if you're not measuring for performance with a probabilistic system, you have no prayer of measuring for compliance either. So developing both approaches hand in hand. Honestly, it's great that it's pretty rare for risk people to be able to go to the CFO and say, hey, there's actually an ROI on what we're doing here, because we're also not leaning into the performance measurement pieces of the puzzle that we need to be doing.
Right. Okay. So to bring this back to kind of a summary of the risks, maybe a little more direct approach. What are, like, for these earlier stage companies, so let's stay with companies that are just adopting the technology and trying to solve some problems, improve some processes, what are the top few risks that you think they have that you're trying to educate them on?
So we'll start with any company as opposed to certain types of companies, but people who are experimenting out there. Number one with a bullet is just user exposure. The last piece of data that I saw was that 72% of workers are using AI in some way, shape, or form, and only about 25%, even in really large companies, actually have some sort of a formal policy around it. That means that the spread between the two is essentially people BYOAI. And they're not necessarily cheating on their job or whatever it is. They're just seeing it as this super useful tool that can help them solve problems. But most people are cheap. So they're using free versions of tools, and free versions of tools, as a marketer, I can tell you that if the product is free, you're the product in some way, shape, or form. And that's something that we all need to cling to, much less having a free product that's, say, controlled by the Chinese or something along those lines. Like, it is absolutely horrifying what's going on in rank and file in organizations all over the place. So we can talk about mitigation, but basic mitigation is having a policy. Does your organization have an actual policy in place that doesn't just say this is forbidden, but helps people understand the wheres and the whys and the hows that they use the technology? I also like to see a manifesto from the leadership of the organization that helps people align around risks. So
I like this. Yeah.
That's one. That's just
so
one basic
sticking with that point for a second, then we'll get to some of the others. Does the policy say, or the manifesto say, we're going to centralize this now, and management is going to pick and evaluate, validate, et cetera, the tools that you're going to use? Or does it allow employees to continue to bring their own tools, but with policies around their use?
It runs the gambit. So we work with counsel on this often, of trying to figure out what is the right organizational balance, because the right move is to make sure that people have the right tools so that they can amplify themselves and have the right training. And this is me talking my book a little bit, but you can't just sprinkle a bunch of Microsoft Copilot licenses over the organization and hope. You really have to enable people to understand how to use them. But a well-written policy has a couple of different pieces in place. If you're going to standardize, that's great. But you also need to have room and some sort of channel for new discovery, such that there's a vetting mechanism. If somebody in marketing decides that there's some neat tool that they want to use, what are the mechanisms internally such that we can give that person the tools such that they can experiment in a way that isn't just messing around with ChatGPT, because that's just the tip of the iceberg as far as capabilities here. So they have to have an angle that they can pursue such that they can use tools. Another piece is if they are going to allow people to BYO AI, basic protocols. It's what I said. You cannot use a free tool. You must use a paid tool, and you must understand that paid tools, often you have to opt out of what's called training. So that's information that's flowing from the user interface to the LLM. And in a lot of cases, that's turned on by default. So even though you're paying for the product, your information is still going out the other side. So a basic understanding for people that these are some settings that need to be turned off. And then types of uses. Are they using it for sensitive data? They shouldn't be. Are they putting PII in there? Is there PCI? Is there HIPAA data? Like, what are the guardrails around the types of information that our organization feels that should be in there or shouldn't be in there? And that requires some more training as well. And we'll talk about it in a minute, I'm sure, but the deeper down the chain towards high sensitivity data the organization is involved in, the more likely it is that they're going to have some sort of a unified solution internally. And then the last piece of it, which is also human-oriented, and I pretty much insist on it at this point, is a non-abdication clause. And this actually doesn't have much to do with risk, except in terms of the quality of output. I think a lot of us saw the news about Deloitte getting caught red-handed not once, but twice in major government contracts where its staff was basically just using the LLM to develop their outputs. Well, you're not allowed to abdicate from your job. You need to amplify yourself with the tools, but recognize that they're not perfect, and you're still responsible for it. And you should and will get fired if you just abdicate from your job the same way you would if you, just put out continually bad output. So those are the elements that I like to see in there. Yeah. And then the manifesto part is separate. First, I get involved with the lawyers as far as the policy because there are a lot of niceties in there. But the manifesto is really how you're going to position it for the organization.
Yeah, never ask the lawyers to have any vision for the organization.
So they go hand in hand, and one references the other. And it is astonishing to me how often I meet with an organization where the leaders they're not taking like a human replacement approach to this. They are authentically trying to amplify their workforce and are making noises about 4-day work weeks and all of these things. And I just asked a large organization CIO last week, have you told your people this? Because your people are probably losing their minds that they could lose their job because of this work that you're doing in this AI office. And here you are saying the most beautiful things about maintaining your culture and maintaining your people, but nobody's told the people that.
Fascinating. So that's what the manifesto is, kind of like a internal, maybe external communication tool. So that's risk one. What's risk two?
So risk two is organizations that are dealing with high sensitivity data. So the startup itself or the organization itself is predicated on the handling of data that has high consequences that are associated with it. So again, this is HIPAA, this is PCI, FERPA, et cetera. Yeah. But it's also the application of it. And NIST will lean into an interpretation of risk that's based around irrevocable decisions or high impact decisions. So are you making a hiring decision? Are you making a healthcare decision? And if you are, is there a human that's in the loop that's overseeing that activity, or are you automating it? So one that I see all the time, and I'm just sort of shocked by, is AI being applied in hiring. And I think most of us have encountered the fact that the applicants are all using AI. So if you put up a job, you'll have 800 applicants in like a few minutes, and they're all remarkably well tailored to your job because the applicants aren't stupid. They're recognizing that there's this opportunity. And then what do you say in the organization? Oh my gosh, how am I going to deal with 800 resumes? This is going to be a nightmare. So you hack together a tool that says, oh, Kevin's the perfect guy for this job. He's already an incumbent. Let's take his CV and use it as an example. And next thing you know, you've just built a selection criteria that's built around a tall white guy from Utah. Like that is
so you've just designed kind of your custom algorithmic bias
exactly
into the process.
And when somebody notices, the lawsuits will be rich, I'm sure, because you're not going to be able to prove it. That's the weakness of the technology, is explainability. So you can explain that you used this sample resume that of course didn't have my name or whatever in it. And you can explain that then you handled it through these prompts that allowed it to sort through the 800 email or resumes. But you can't explain why the algorithm made the choices that it made. And without that level of explainability,
that limits your defensibility.
Yep. Exactly. That lends itself to defensibility at the other end.
That's a tough one.
It's a tough one. It is.
That's human behavior. And that's like something that I think HR leaders and other people are going to be inclined to use, and maybe just not be aware of the risk of algorithmic bias.
Well, this is going to be a win for the Indeeds of the world and the giant organizations, because what they're doing and what part of this conversation is about is they're going to align to as many best practices as they can, such that they can do tracking behind the scenes that have humans involved, that's looking for anomalies, that's looking for reinforcement, and it's going to be done on a predictable schedule, as in not just every quarter, but when we do a model change, we have to do this. Where are the feedback loops? Where are they coming from in the organization? Is there a channel of communication when the hiring manager starts noticing it going a little bit bonkers? Is that triggerable such it gets escalated within the organization and somebody starts paying attention to it? It's kind of common sense, to be honest. Again, it tying right in with performance. You need your system to be high performance.
So you're saying that that's creating a big opportunity for a placement company or hiring company like Indeed to help with this compliance?
I would say so. Certain state level and city level requirements. So Illinois has one. New York City has one as well. There is the potential for auditability there. With what's going on federally, it's really unclear how that stuff is going to hold up or whether it's going to hold up. But nobody wants to be on the receiving end of that. Really? You want to be doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, not just because it's a compliance tick box. So smart organizations are leaning that way, but I'll tell you, it's generally the very large organizations. There's a lot of range between agile little 2-person tech company that's doing whatever they're doing and pretty easily putting together some of these controls, and ponderous 500-person, whatever they are, type companies that have no idea where to start.
Right. That's fascinating. So that must be a big challenge for you going into a client, figuring out where they are and how to pull the organizational levers the right way.
Well,
or do you avoid that and just like train them and hope for the best, or put it on them?
We do a triage, of course,
Yeah.
and we're trying to uncover where the riskiest behaviors are. Is it at the policy level? Is it on the application level? Is it literacy? Usually the answer is yes. It's pretty much everywhere. And then find the highest risk use cases that we can, and then lean into those as far as trying to develop the right control structures.
Right. Got it. Wow. Whole new field of compliance, it seems to me.
I think it's one of the jobs. People ask me all the time that, what are the jobs of tomorrow? And I do struggle a little bit, to be honest, of what a lot of them are. But bias auditor is totally one of them. I don't see a world where we're going to be doing automated bias audits, because then the bias auditor has a bias.
That'll be biased.
It goes on from there.
Great place to insert a human bias auditor. Yeah. Fascinating. So maybe one or two more of the top things you see or need to address or deal with coming into an organization.
I would say that misalignment is a big one. And again, it comes back to this, I'm just continually amazed at the stuff that's being produced at the business end of the stick that isn't yet being expected to have measurement tied to it. So, and it's just happening on sort of an ad hoc basis. And don't get me wrong, I love selling the dream of all of the fun tools that we can bring into the organization to solve our problems. So you like vibe coding tools and workflow automation tools. In fact, a lot of our business is building up that exact capability within the organization. Right. And what have I done? I've equipped hundreds of people in an organization with all the tools they need to expose the company to a ton of risk. So we try really hard to make sure that we're in alignment with whatever the compliance aspects are of the business. And often it doesn't happen. And again, we're aware of both sides of the puzzle, but there are plenty of organizations that are only really caring about the solution. And often they'll only really realize it. Let's just say you have financial controls of some kind that's in your organization, and somebody on the business end has decided that they are going to automate a whole bunch of sales functionality that crosses over the organization, gets the data that the salespeople need, and now there's no like continuity chain through the org chart as far as where the data is being passed, because org charts don't just exist to create bureaucracy, they exist to create controls, right? But this like subgroup in the organization has just shot an API into whatever the financial control system is. And often people only notice it when some, functional accountant is like, I'm just not really getting any work from the teams. What's going on? Are we like not selling anything anymore? And it turns out it's because the team has just bypassed them. And all of a sudden it raises flags all over the organization as far as the stuff that's happening and which data pools. That's one. Another one that we see is just usage. Well, okay, these are sort of separate, but one is credential exposure. So we love workflows. They're amazing. You can do tons of things with tools like Zapier or N8N or whatever, but they require access credentials for people who are generally technical.
Hmm.
And if you start sharing those workflows, I saw one the other day it basically was linked into a CEO's personal Gmail account.
Okay.
And there was a reason for it. It was like they thought that they needed to connect to the calendar or whatever. But I took a glance at it and I realized that it would take me all of about 35 seconds to build a second workflow that just fed all of the CEO's personal email to a spreadsheet for
Hmm.
me if I wanted to. Because without understanding the ramifications, they'd exposed a bunch of endpoints in the organization. So that's one. Another in more complex organizations are usage of different documents. So if you're in a SharePoint environment, so a Microsoft environment, or if you're in a Google environment with Gemini, you can add access to different folders, and then you can build little chatbots and things like that that talk to
Sure.
folders. But do all the people who have access to the chatbot, or should they have access to all of the data that's in all the folders? And this is one of the reasons why Microsoft Copilot has been so slow to develop, because Microsoft keenly understands this particular risk, and they're trying to be able to build in the flexibility that allows the CEO to have a chatbot that basically can see everything, but the
Hmm.
accounting
Hmm.
team really has a chatbot that can see accounting, but it doesn't see human resources or something along those lines.
So that's an interesting problem. So it seems to me that's probably a problem that existed before AI, kind of access to different systems, role-based access, whether it was appropriate or not, and so forth. But AI may be, and the tools that it makes available may be accelerating the issue and making it more difficult to deal with.
Oh,
Does that
absolutely.
make
And
sense?
people
Yeah.
have gotten away, sort of air quotes, with really sloppy data organization and
Right.
rights organization. And they're realizing pretty abruptly that both of those are a huge problem. That if you haven't done a great job of standardizing how data works in your organization, it's going to be hard for you to implement like cross-platform solutions. And even then, you have all of the rights issues that are inherent with that as well.
Right. Right. Okay. This is good. So I think at this point, for now, we've spent enough time kind of in the organization getting the lay of the land in terms of this new risk compliance alignment world. Let's step out a little bit. Regulation on the more macro scale. So you briefly mentioned the EU AI Act and the fact that we're not likely to see regulation of AI coming, in that kind of direct form in the United States anytime soon. However, some companies doing business in the EU or who are dependent on workflows where data comes from the EU or something like that, they may be implicated. The AI Act may apply to their business processes. Maybe share a few thoughts about that. Is that a real concern for U.S. businesses right now, or is that more down the road or not a concern?
It's a business risk issue versus a compliance risk issue. It is
Hmm.
absolutely a compliance risk because the EU AI Act requires literacy around AI risks.
Right.
And it is technically enforceable. Whether it has been enforced yet or whether it will be enforced is really anybody's bet, but it's good practice, right? That a well-crafted piece of legislation has pieces in it that have their common sense, that the first place you need to start around risk or exposure is understanding risk and exposure. And the education components of the EU AI Act are great.
Right.
They're exposing people to hallucinations and bias and some of these drift issues and other things. And if you have staff who are operating workflows from Paris for, anytime they need to be compliant.
Hmm.
And honestly, it's often a road for us into organizations who realize they have that regulatory compliance issue and then recognize, oh heck, I don't want to just randomly train the people who are in Europe. We want some sort of standardized approach. So I like to think that our approach with the NIST RMF also dovetails nicely with the EU AI Act. So
Got it. Got
we'll
it.
end up educating the entire organization around a standardized centralized approach, and then just amplifying the people who need the EU AI Act component on the other side. But think about GDPR. So you have an audience who knows what GDPR is.
Yes.
It was not something that Americans were worried about too much. Americans now worry about GDPR. So it will happen over time. And
it's a good analogy. Yeah.
And understanding that arc of time, really all, I think in a lot of ways, both we're from a macro lens, it's going to take some bad things happening. And I don't want to be the guy who's wishing for bad things to happen, but a lot of bad things happened with European citizen data under GDPR. And like now they're cramping down. So some bad things are going to happen at some time between this afternoon and in the next 5 years involving AI and human level risk. And all of a sudden it will get really real and there'll be a mad scramble to figure this stuff out. So the proactive organization thinks about this.
So it makes a lot of sense to me to build to one standard. Like if you're going to be doing business in Europe, you might as well integrate your NIST framework and the EU AI Act framework if you can. I don't know how integrable those two are. And are they? Are they?
They're pretty well aligned. They are, and it's some of it's just vocabulary. So it's it's a matter of phrasing things in different ways. But you're totally right, and it's why organizations have appreciated the RMF in that it gives them something that makes sense, that is doable. It's not super onerous to get into place, and is also defensible within the EU. Now, the EU also has many tiers. So I know parts of this audience are startups, and you have a real obligation as a startup. So we were just talking about users. So users, they're deploying, it's called a deployer. But if you're someone who is bringing a new AI technology to the European market, now you really have some obligations.
Yes, and that's direct regulation now.
So you need basically a CE mark for your product as it's inbound, and you need to prove all of these different pieces. And you can accidentally become a distributor is another category of entity within the EU and the EU AI Act. And
that's a form of direct regulation too.
Yes, exactly. Well, this is all under the EU AI Act.
Yes.
So if you are a startup and you're having beady eyes about getting into European market, and you look at it and you think, oh, I don't really want to comply with this, so I'm going to use some service provider who is already embedded in Barcelona or wherever, and they're going to take care of this for me, you still bear liability, and they bear a lot of liability. They'd be crazy, frankly, to do anything with you without you proving that chain of custody down the chain. You don't obviate your responsibility merely because you're not the one who's doing the distribution.
Got it. Now, I'd like to imagine something with you for a moment, do a little thought experiment. So let's say that there was a initiative to enact AI regulation in Congress in the United States. It's this interesting situation, it seems, where a lot of larger companies or companies that are doing business in Europe kind of are getting into that regulated zone. But politically, there's a lot of skepticism or even opposition to the way Europe regulates these things like privacy and AI, and this feeling that it weighs kind of individual interests and protections more heavily than it should against promoting innovation, for example. So like with those competing forces around, maybe how would you imagine, your answer might be it's just not going to happen, but like how would US regulation potentially occur, and what would be the forces at play?
One of the shames of what's going on with the federal moratorium around AI legislation is a lot of the legislation makes sense as far
Right.
as protecting minors, as far as protecting certain areas of data, certain uses of it. Like it just absolutely common sense stuff, but getting in the way of progress is a high concern for this administration right now.
Right.
And I won't lie, they're not wrong that we're not operating alone. That we really are in an arms race with China. And again, all the fun stuff that AI brings, it is bringing some hellacious macro global risks along with it. And we would be crazy to impede that. So that said, what would be common sense is the NIST RMF is great. I don't want to sound like a fanboy of it, but it's not a huge burden to put into place.
It's like a thoughtful framework.
It's pretty
it's kind
thoughtful.
of a picture of what a regulation might look like.
Yeah. And yes, it's going to be hard for small companies to comply with it, but those same companies that are unwilling to comply with it are probably the ones that are also going to get sued when they misuse data in some way, shape, or form. So at some stage of growth, you sort of have to put on your big boy pants and like invest in it. I would say sort of like SOC 2 type compliance where, if you need it, you need it. There's not like, there's no ambiguity.
There's regulations which give smaller organizations or organizations of different capabilities like some leeway to do things a little different. Like the HIPAA security rule does that. It has some sensitivity for your size and scale and resources. I wonder if something like that could be part of an AI regulation.
So Utah's establishment of the Office of AI Policy is unique and wonderful, that it's established safe harbors for organizations that want to experiment on the edge of risky data such that they won't get just sued into oblivion. And it's allowing companies to lean into things that would otherwise just be kryptonite, like youth mental health. Like, oh my gosh, like talk about something that's high risk, but it's a very pragmatic state and they're trying to solve real
issues. Are there
issues.
other states that are taking that approach, have these sandboxes?
I haven't looked in a minute, but I don't believe so. And I also am not, I'm pretty close to the Office of AI Policy. They're just great folk. And they're not politicians, by the way. It's run by a mathematician. And they, at last heard, had not received the nasty gram from the Department of Justice that some states did. So Colorado received one. Believe it or not, Texas did, because it was believed by the DOJ that they were their laws that were coming online were an overreach. So Utah is sort of running a little bit under the radar, but it would be a good national model too. We talk about, in a perfect world I'm actually not a huge fan of just granting immunity to small firms because they're small.
Sure, I like that.
Seeing what I see, we will have those hypothetical one-man or 10-man billion-dollar companies that are handling enormous amounts of data and like
sensitive data.
The Colorado AI Act, for example, that's supposed to go online later this year, it has an exclusion for companies under 50 people. And it's sort of laughable that as somebody who's building my own company as AI first, right? I will never have 50 people. Like why would I do that? I want to be as lean and mean as I possibly can be. So that's a mistake as well. So establishing the sandboxes such that there's a logical place for people to play with sensitive topics and be able to, I'm not going to say duck liability, but be able to deal with liability in a way that gets them through that baby stage of maturation.
Well, in a controlled environment, you can see what is problematic, what the risks are, what kind of exposures there might be, and kind of address that before releasing it into the world. Is that part of the idea?
Exactly. And test it. And I keep coming back to that. What were the results? What did it actually do? And did it do what it was supposed to do? And balancing all of that out. Whereas a lot of states are taking just a no tolerance approach to it. And it's a shame because the technology has a massive opportunity to disrupt, but it also has a massive opportunity to improve. And we want to give companies as much leeway as we possibly can such that they can experiment and do good things while not having really crazy externalities happening as small firms go wild with big sets of data.
Right, right. Yeah. So it sounds like there are some things like the sandboxes, state regulation, voluntary frameworks like NIST that are there. People are using them. Some of them even have regulatory status or standing of some point of some kind.
Let me push back on just one thing you said.
Yes, sure, sure.
I don't like state level regulation of something that's this complex and this large. It is a mistake. We need federal
preemption
legislation around this. And I would love if it included the Utah Safe Harbor type approaches.
And that's a position of the administration as well, as federal preemption of AI regulation. I believe.
But they don't want the actual legislation. They want some sort of executive approval over it. So meanwhile, we don't have regulation. We have states all suing the government. It's the worst sort of outcome where nobody has any idea of what they're supposed to be doing. And for a small company to have to comply with 50 half-baked state laws, it's crazy. So I just implore the lawmakers to just come up with some common sense pieces or split it into a couple of different pieces of legislation. Let's just maybe take care of, basic things like image rights and, deep fakes and pornography.
Sure,
and there's just so many horrible things that are out there brewing. Like, can we just protect the kids first? Can we get behind that? Just like, that shouldn't be that hard.
Hopefully nothing terrible happens in that area. Well, we'll see how that develops. So this is a good segue to my last question on this topic before I ask you for a few predictions. So a company that's like a small to mid-sized company, let's say it's got some funding, it's developing an AI system, starting to make some sales, but they're resource constrained. How do they think about all of this? Like what should they do besides hire you, of course, which is a given, right?
Yes, of course. They're not thinking about this. Most of them. I mean, unless they're in healthcare, there are certain verticals where you wouldn't get your funding unless you can answer some of these questions. Thankfully, right? There was definitely,
and that's probably going to be a bigger thing too. It's like it's becoming more and more part of diligence in these fundraising processes.
We provide advice to VCs, PEs, et cetera. So when they're thinking about some of these pieces that they're in place, but there was definitely a Wild West period there in like 2023 where people raised a bunch of money and nobody was asking these questions. So is the organization now, has it matured and has it done these things? So even though it may not relate to product, that policy and manifesto part is essential. Like if you don't have that yet, get the policy in place. Like maybe you're not going to pay counsel to review it, but having a decent policy in place so people have the right sort of guardrails, that's really important. And then that manifesto is also important to communicate that, because even though you think you're a product company, you have salespeople and you have marketing people and you have all of these other people that aren't necessarily tied into the product. And then on the product side, you need to be looking at your vendor stack and make sure that you're not incurring risk with the vendors that you're deploying. It's solid questions to ask about how they're doing their own measurement. And by the way, why did you take them on as a vendor if they couldn't actually justify whatever they've sold you as far as a solution in terms of performance? So it should be as much, again, this feel like a broken record, but it should be as much a performance question as it is a risk question, because a lot of these things aren't actually doing what they're supposed to do yet.
Yeah, and there's definitely a close relationship between performance and compliance, performance or compliance risk.
And let's just assume we're talking about companies that are on this high risk continuum, because if you're building marketing blogs or something along those lines, it's not going to be the end of the world. But if you're dealing with high risk data, then you really do need to understand the ramifications of this, or else the lawyers will find you eventually. So you don't want to be able to bring bureaucracy. So the counsel from wise Kevin would be, again, focus on performance versus risk. So do we understand the performance of what we're building in a variable environment such that we can demonstrate that performance to our CTO anytime he needs to know whether or not it's drifting off base, whether it's doing what it's supposed to be doing? Are the right feedback loops in place? Like, this is a more adult way to approach those questions, because as soon as you start ringing the risk bells, people's eyes roll. And,
let's roll out the framework.
Yeah, let's roll out the framework. Gonna have to hire that expensive consultant to figure it out. Like,
yeah.
So speak the language the organization wants to speak, which is almost always going to be performance, and turn it into a marketing advantage, because we just predicated this part of the conversation on them dealing with high risk data. Do you think their clients aren't going to want to know the same thing? Truth is, the clients aren't asking the right questions either.
Right.
But now you can put it forward as a strength of your platform, that it's compliant with all of these things. And obviously we can demonstrate that at any given point. So now you're scratching the right itch for your board, for your team, for the marketers, the salespeople, et cetera.
Great.
And you're accomplishing the right goal. And, somewhere in the organization, somebody crosses out performance and says alignment, but that's okay. That's fine. The goal is still being met.
Yeah, I love it. That's a really good summary. So let's get into, for kind of our last segment, some predictions. So you're thinking about this every day, talking to a lot of organizations. We're in the early stages, the early innings, so to speak. What are your predictions for maybe the top 2 or 3 surprises? And I'm not going to go like 5 years, because that's like an eternity in AI. So maybe the next like 18 to 24 months that maybe aren't being talked about a lot in the media, or that where the conventional wisdom might be wrong.
Okay, I have a bunch that are mulling around in my head, and they're not all risk or compliance based.
They don't have to be. No.
Everyone's going to keep their heads low through this election cycle. This is already going to be an incredibly contentious midterm, and I don't think you're going to see giant moves as far as this technological displacement aspect of AI until after the midterms are done and there's some sort of stability out there. However, I am seeing it every single day. And it is happening quietly behind the scenes, and people are refining the technologies that will absolutely enable jobs to be replaced in part or in whole. And I bet it's going to be all open season after the election, and we're going to start seeing some real major job loss. 2, something bad's going to happen. And this is, again, I don't want to be that guy. I'm very optimistic, but I'm sort of amazed that nothing bad has happened yet, outside of some fraud and kind of little things. We actually haven't seen any really bad things happen yet. And whether it happens in the military, or whether it happens in politics, or just at large, I think we're going to see some.
And these bad things, or the bad thing that happens, it could be of any flavor.
Sort. It could be, some sort of decentralized, like agent-based attack on financial systems, or technology sector, or energy, or whatever it may be. It might be foreign state actors. There are so many ways that
personal information disclosures on a massive scale,
But people ringing the risk bell, the logical response is, well, nothing really bad has happened yet. Well, something's going to happen. At some point, something's going to happen, and it's hard for me to tell you what it is, but it will happen. Stuff is getting really weird really fast, is the other bit. And we're very rapidly bridging the gap between it being a fun little chatbot that you talk to and having more like swarm-like behaviors to it, where you have disconnected, millions or even tens of millions of individual AIs that are essentially, I don't want to say collaborating because that's the wrong term, but they're reinforcing each other. And that's not what you'd call AGI, but it predicates what could become like a swarm-based intelligence as the AIs are starting to solve problems in mass. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that could accelerate things really, really quickly in sort of, again, strange ways.
You're going to be asked to write a Black Mirror episode soon of swarm-based intelligence.
I feel like I'm living in a Black Mirror episode a lot of the time. That's for sure. So listeners, by all means, check out something called Moltbook.com, which is 1.6 million agents that are all in a forum that's only for agents, and they're talking about life, the universe, and everything, and their users in there. It's crazy.
Now this is a risk related episode, but let's maybe make one optimistic prediction to end on. So like the Hollywood movie ending here. So we give listeners something to smile about.
Well, the practical applications in research are absolutely amazing. And you're starting to see clinical research and traditional research accelerating in all kinds of new dimensions and new directions. So there are new ideas that are popping up, and there are more smart people who are more focused on the core kernel of what they're chasing as opposed to just swimming in a morass of data than ever before. There's still a long way to go, but I'm really excited about that and what's possible. I'm just the other one is it's both a prediction and something I'm excited about. Is I'm really excited about the coming oral revolution. That we have spent all of our adult life typing into machines because we type into machines. And we're entering this era where machines can converse with us just like we converse with each other. And at least for me, it has been a huge unlock to switch to oral communication because I'm a decent oral communicator, but I'm a terrible typist. So all of this
so it's like on Star Trek where they say computer and then
exactly. But there's a tribal aspect of it that we outside of our teenagers, like people don't type information interpersonally, they have conversations. And being able to have conversations with our platforms, or I mean, this is going to sound terrible, but even like a copy machine, like trying to deal with a copy machine like in its current incarnation, when you could say, hey, I want multicolor for the first 15 pages, and then you know
what I do with copy machines, I like, unless it's like loading paper, which I can do, I just walk away and hope someone else solves the problem and come back an hour later.
So there's, as long as we survive this, there are so many neat applications of the technology, and getting people focused on the things they like to do and not just focused on the sort of the rigmarole of the administrata of their job. That's really cool. And
that could create, like, as you mentioned before, that can create new jobs too. So there may be some job loss, but there will also be job creation.
Yeah.
Or job optimization. Or are you thinking it's probably going to be net job loss?
I am unfortunately in the camp that I can't bend my brain around. We were going to end on a positive note, Dan. We were going to end on a positive note.
I mean, it's hard for a lawyer and a risk person to end on a positive note. This demonstrates that we need an algorithm to help us.
Well, to be continued. It will work out. Like, humanity figures these things out, and equilibrium will be achieved in the system, but it might take longer for the equilibrium to be achieved than would be desirable for us. So there could be some rough times here in the next few years as society is figuring this out. But these, macro conversations about UBI, they're not coming from nowhere. They are because there are a lot of people who fundamentally believe that there'll be a lot of job loss. So.
Yeah, and UBI being universal basic income. Policies.
Exactly.
Terrific. Oh, Kevin, this was fascinating, and thank you so much for taking the time, and look forward to chatting again soon.
Yeah, no, it's been delightful. Always happy to help. Ascendlabs.ai is our site.
Terrific.
And we do all kinds of interesting things.
Okay. Talk to you soon. And that concludes our episode of Free Flow. Thank you for joining us today. For more information, please visit our website at orensteinlegal.com and navigate to the podcast page. Remember to subscribe or follow Free Flow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube so you never miss an episode or update. This podcast is for informational purposes only, is not legal advice, and does not create an attorney-client relationship. Thank you for listening.